Hi, my name is David. I'm going to walk through quickly some background information related to housing in Pacific Grove and talk a little bit about why housing matters. First of all, housing matters because it's a big part of our lives. It's where we live, where we grow up, where we grow old. Uh, it shapes who we become in terms of access to employment opportunities, access to education, public health outcomes. It's essential to our economic vitality. We devote a lot of our land in Pacific Grove to housing. And it's something that we spend a lot of money on, whether we're renters or owners. It's one of the biggest investments we make in the course of our lives. Pacific Grove has a really interesting housing past in terms of the Chautauqua and the tent cabins and small bungalows that shaped the city's physical character from the start, which became more of an established town over time and had a pretty rich mix of housing types that were allowed in its early days. That's given us a rich diversity of housing types today, although today our zoning is mostly geared towards single family zoning, and I'll talk a little bit about that. One of the types of housing that we're particularly interested in is what we call affordable housing. And when I say affordable housing, I mean it's housing that people pay approximately 30% of their income in order to live there. For upper income households, 30% is a fairly large amount of money and they can afford a home in Pacific Grove. For lower income folks, it's not that much money they can't afford in the market. So we build affordable housing that's something they can afford. They still pay rent based on their income. And this is an example. This is the Vista Point Senior Apartments, 49 units managed by Eden Housing that is targeted to lower income seniors. So Housing Pacific Grove, there's about 8,400 units of housing. About 2/3 of that is single family detached homes and the rest are homes that are in duplexes or up to apartments, 20 plus units in apartments or condominiums. 20% are unoccupied. So those are second homes that people are not living in year round. More than half were built before 1960. And then in terms of that category of affordable housing that's income qualified, only 2% of the housing units in Pacific Grove are in that category. So this map shows the residential land use in the city, the zoning. The yellow is the single family detached zoning. The oranges and pinks are the higher density and mixed use zoning. So 75% of the residential land is used for 60% of the housing in terms of single family detached homes, and 40% of the housing is provided on 25% of the land, of the residential land. As you can see here, in terms of who lives here, we're an older population, about 26% over the age of 64, but we also have a lot of families. You can see the breakdown between those who own and those who rent and that have children at home with them. And then we have small households, in terms of owner-occupied housing, about a quarter of those homes have just one person in them and about half have two people in them. In terms of race and ethnicity, about 80% are white, 20% are people of color. More than half of the households are renter households in Pacific Grove. And you're more likely if you're white to be a homeowner and less likely if you're a person of color. And there are historic reasons for that in terms of race restrictions that used to be on people's ability to purchase a home in Pacific Grove and elsewhere. And that's something that we are as a society looking to address in terms of creating more equity in terms of wealth building opportunities and just equitable housing outcomes. Housing's expensive, no big surprise there. About $950,000 is the median home value in Pacific Grove. $3,200 is the median rent. And you can see here, that means that people are paying a lot of their income on housing, particularly if you're the median income or below. And a lot of people are paying well over 30% of their income towards housing. As an economy, the local economy, we're a hospitality industry, a lot of service workers, they're lower paid. So 2/3 of the people are earning $3,300 a month or less. That means that a lot of them can't afford to be in Pacific Grove and they commute in from elsewhere. 16% of the workers in Pacific Grove live in Pacific Grove. So we have thousands of people who make our community work every day and cannot afford to be here. And their commutes add to traffic, environmental impacts, and certainly has an impact on their lives and not being able to be home and spend a lot of time during commute hours. So some key takeaways. Desirable place to be, high valued housing, high cost land, limited housing supply, second homes, an aging population means we have fewer people in the homes that we have. Historically, we allowed more diversity of housing than we allow today. There's a mismatch between our economy, which is a service economy, and the cost of our housing. and the types of housing we have available. 2% of our housing is affordable, which is a pretty low percentage. And then we know that water is an issue. It's something the city is working to address with the region. It's not something we're going to be addressing in this project. We know that that's an obstacle to getting more housing, but we're going to be talking about other things that we can do to create more housing outcomes, even as we work to address the water issue. So now we're going to ask you to answer a few questions related to the kind of community you would like to be. Thanks for listening.